in case you've been living under a rock, which most people still are and forever will be, Bitcoin is the future. Bitcoin is the goal for all of humans over the next decade is to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. And those who don't focus on doing such, those who don't see the impacts that Bitcoin is going to have as a store of value and a medium of exchange in our world, and how it's going to disrupt the entire banking system of the entire global infrastructure of banking, the largest industry to ever exist, well, you're going to be missing out on the largest wealth transfer to ever exist. And yes, Bitcoin is going to disrupt every single space. However, in this video, I want to specifically describe how I visualize Bitcoin disrupting the real estate business. And the reason why I want to dive into this specifically is number one, real estate has been the primary business of wealth accumulation. And that is one of the reasons why I entered the real estate industry coming out of high school. I've been a real estate agent for 3 years. I'm 21 years old now. I have done so fairly successfully. I got into production after 6 months of getting my license, and I have sold millions and millions of dollars of real estate over the last 3 years, servicing clients, two of which are buying and selling homes. And during the last 3 years, even before I got into real estate, I was introduced to Bitcoin, and I was introduced to it just researching online and listening to people, and it definitely caught my attention years ago, and I've been very involved in the crypto space for 3 to 4 years now. And I see Bitcoin acting as the perfect form of collateral. Collateral being an asset or a form of property that a borrower offers to a lender as a form of security, where if the borrower fails to pay off the loan plus interest that they're obligated to pay the lender, whatever the underlying asset is, whatever the form of collateral is then seized from the borrower by the lender, and that form of collateral, that piece of property, is then sold to pay off the debt obligation that the borrower failed to pay. And the most common form and the best form of collateral has always been real estate. And the reason why is because real estate does a really good job of maintaining value. And the reason why real estate does a really good job of maintaining value is because there will always be demand for housing. Everybody needs a home. People will never not need a roof to live under, to protect them from storms, to have a family, and all these things. And people will always and forever be paying for housing. So it is the best form of collateral for banks to get a return on their investment, lending their capital to borrowers at a fairly good interest rate relative to the risk of the real estate going to zero, which probably will never happen because humans will always need housing. And now we have Bitcoin in the picture. And Bitcoin has a very unique value proposition to both the lender and the borrower, where it also, in a very interesting way, replaces the need to have real estate as a form of direct collateral. And it's a much better instrument to collateralize because it has various characteristics that real estate does not have. Yes, real estate will always have demand. However, you can't exchange it immediately, internationally, digitally, and cheaply. It's a very illiquid asset. It takes weeks, if not months, to sell and transfer hands. And you even, just another example of why real estate isn't the best form of collateral is we have natural disasters. If a hurricane comes through and completely destroys your home, well, now you have a debt product, an obligation to pay the lender. And if you fail to pay, well, there's no longer any house there of value to be collateralized to pay off the loan and pay your debt obligation off. And this creates a value proposition that has never existed before. And this value proposition is going to be extremely profitable for those who decide to implement Bitcoin as the form of collateral for what they're lending to build. I see Bitcoin as a really unique form of collateral. And we are so early on Bitcoin adoption because there are so many other value propositions where Bitcoin ultimately is going to replace the entire banking infrastructure of the world. And we're going through this adoption curve on a new banking system, a new technology, that of which its price is directly proportional to its numbers of users. And the numbers of users are growing at twice the rate of the internet. We've never seen a international technology being adopted this quickly, that of which is 100% scarce. Therefore, with increased adoption comes direct increase in value, and that value cannot be diluted through more shares being offered to the marketplace. So we're going through this cycle over the next decade where Bitcoin is going through mass adoption, it's going through exponential price appreciation. And by taking on this Bitcoin collateral strategy early, you can drastically increase your scale of production in really any business or industry. And for me, it's specifically real estate. And what I want to dive into is I want to analogize what this could look like if you begin accumulating a Bitcoin reserve, using that Bitcoin reserve as a form of collateral to lend onto specifically real estate, and then by servicing the real estate industry, consumers will pay rent, or you have an Airbnb, or I'm increasing my real estate agency business where we're hoping to increase our volume and therefore increasing our net revenue through commissions on the number of sales that we do every single year. We're going to back these businesses with Bitcoin. And Bitcoin consistently grows about 50% compounding year over year. And what that means is that realistically, of course, we have market swings. And when your entry position has a huge impact on whether or not life actually becomes 50% cheaper every single year over year. However, if you simply dollar cost average the entity, it has shown consistently that throughout this adoption curve, that is exactly what will happen. If you dollar cost average Bitcoin and build a Bitcoin reserve and you live off of that reserve, life is going to become 50% cheaper for you year over year. And this is going to exist until the adoption cycle finishes and Bitcoin is now the unit of exchange for humans across the entire world, and also the best form of collateral, and also the best form of preserving your purchasing power. So if we take this into an example of you build a Bitcoin reserve and you lend off of it, this is exactly what that would look like. Because at the end of the day, another thing that people get very wrong about Bitcoin is, well, when do you sell it? The thing is, you will never have to sell it because in the future, you'll simply just borrow off of it, where you'll have a Bitcoin reserve. And if you want to buy a house, you just get a loan for $500,000, and then $500,000 of Bitcoin will be held in an escrow account as a form of collateral if you fail to pay the debt obligation plus the interest to the lender. And then you can buy whatever you want with the financing, and you never have to sell your Bitcoin, and you'll never have to pay capital gains tax on it. You'll never have to do all of these things that you had to do previously with previous financial instruments. And over time, so let's say you buy a $500,000 house today and you own $500,000 in Bitcoin, and you collateralize that loan with the $500,000 in Bitcoin. Well, now you purchase this house, and real estate, let's say, appreciates 7 to 8% year over year. Well, your Bitcoin appreciates 50% year over year. So in 2 years from now, your $500,000 Bitcoin is going to be worth around $900,000, maybe $1 million. Let's just round numbers. Over 2 to 3 years, your $500,000 in Bitcoin is now $1 million in Bitcoin. Well, your debt to income ratio has now halved, where you purchase a $500,000 house with a $500,000 loan. Your Bitcoin is now $1 million. Therefore, your debt to income ratio went from 100% to 50%. And over those 2 years, well, now that your debt to income ratio has halved, you can now lend more money off the same amount of Bitcoin. And that is the exact description of how, by storing your capital in a Bitcoin reserve, life is going to simply get cheaper for you. And if you utilize Bitcoin as a form of collateral, and that is exactly how banks are beginning to see it as the perfect form of collateral, you'll be able to lend off your Bitcoin reserve and borrow the money that goes down in value while owning the very unit of exchange or the savings technology that goes up in value. And at the end of the day, that's what Bitcoin is. It's a savings technology, and it's the best unit of exchange for us to transfer good digitally, internationally, and for humans to operate on a new banking system that of which operates 24/7. You don't have to wait 3 to 5 business days. There's no intermediary or businessman that you have to deal with. You don't have to pay these exacerbated amount of fees. You don't have to deal with all the bullshit that comes through the banking system, especially when you are dealing with very high volume or high numbers of transactions, or a very high valued transaction of tens of millions of dollars doing an international ordeal. So all in all, yes, Bitcoin is going to revolutionize the banking system. It is the best form of collateral, and the winning strategy over the next decade is not just accumulating the most amount of Bitcoin. For the meantime, it's borrowing cheap money, and you shouldn't even be borrowing money to buy Bitcoin. You should just figure out how to increase your monthly income to buy more Bitcoin. But over time, the winning strategy is going to be owning a Bitcoin reserve and collateralizing it, lending off of it, and then using that capital to purchase assets that of which are going to be cash flow positive, whether it's a business, a service, or product-based business. And that is going to be the winning strategy over the next decade. And if you want to outperform any business or any industry, you can simply do so by understanding the applications of Bitcoin and how it's going to disrupt the world, and how the adoption cycle is going to make everything 50% cheaper for you year over year for the next decade, and how you never will have to sell Bitcoin because you can simply lend off of it. So that is the world that we are entering, or that is the world that we're currently in, and this is the world that I'm taking complete advantage of to scale my business. So yeah, that's the end of my little just brain thought rant, and that's what's up.